This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Paul Hansen. Thurley, Ruxton by Philip Verrill Mighels. Chapter 42. The Race. There was certainly less than 300 yards between the cars when Jan and Max, who had turned 5 miles back on suspicion to pursue the Stuyvesant machine, were obliged to slow for the briefest period where the ruts would have wrecked their motor. Stuyvesant, glancing back at them quickly, was confident of winning should his car behave its best, but his face was grim. "These men have no right, wouldn't dare," he started to cry, but he realized they would halt at nothing as a vivid conviction was flashed on his brain that doubtless they had struck the blow that had all but killed his man. "We're gaining," cried Thurley, her strength and courage reasserting themselves with wonderful resilience. "Can you give her any more?" For his answer, Stuyvesant jammed the muffler cutout with his heel. A terrific series of detonations instantly followed. The car plunged forward with newer zest, and trees shot past in a blur. In the moment's advantage caused by the ruts that held the pursuing monster at the rear, they nearly doubled their lead. Then on came the giant limousine, like the fragment of a meteor ripping up the road. It was Jan driving, his rage prodigious, his lust for murder now a mania broken from its bounds. The car was one of enormous power, a racing model, equipped with the limousine for winter use, but little hindered by this bulky superstructure. Its 6 big cylinders were pouring might and Gatling fusillade upon the road. It roared like an engine of doom and destruction, hurtling and rocketing to overtake the fleeing machine ahead. Stuyvesant's car was low to the ground like a greyhound eager for work. For some inexplicable reason, the motor that had balked in the night was running like a dream, its mighty pistons hurtling a cataract of power upon the shaft and wheels. Despite the superior dynamic of the car behind, it continued to creep away. Snow, frozen dust, and a stifling cloud of fumes seemed scorched from Stuyvesant's path when he leaned a little forward and gave more oil to the swiftly heating motor. Din, crazy speed, and appalling velocity marked the course where the huge devices raced. A knife-edge wind seemed hurtling down upon Thurley as they split the frozen air. The road became a torrent, rushing incredibly under their wheels, its grey and snow-white blended in the froth. They swung about an angle in the highway out upon a wider pike which led straightway to a village small in size. For one brief second Stuyvesant dreamed that to halt in the town and demand protection might be advisable, but he almost as quickly abandoned the thought as an invitation to death. Not only was the settlement insignificant, and the hour too early for its officers to be astir in the street, but the fiery projectile behind, belching red flame and scorching the very snow from its path, was heating to new efficiency and making perceptible gains. There was nothing on earth that Robley could do by way of giving more power to his car, or heaving out freight to make it lighter. He could only attempt to hold his lead by absolutely reckless driving, hoping that some deserved catastrophe might overtake the minotaur of evil there behind. They shot through the village like a fury of battle hurled by a monstrous hurricane, frightful echoes of their Gatling fire thundering back from the houses. A sharp staccato like a pistol shot in the uproar of red-hot exhausts pierced through the roaring of the car behind and told of a miss in one of her 6 great cylinders. 2 men and a dog had spun dizzily past, the sole signs of life in the village. Again that barking explosion came, and Stuyvesant's heart and his stampeding car leapt like animals together. He knew his pursuers were in trouble. By yards and rods the limousine was falling to the rear, lamed by the one bulking cylinder, now running, now dead for a second or less. It relinquished speed like a marathon runner facing a hill on the final lap of his race. A gap of nearly a mile extent was swiftly opened between the two, as Stuyvesant held to his speed. Exultation burning in his pulses, flaring in his motor, and roaring in his wake made hot his frame, despite the biting wind and brightening of his eyes with triumph. He shot to the cover of a stretch of woods where the road wound westward like a river. A crack like a rifle's incisive note rang out on the air, and his car swerved wildly from the road. A tire had gone from the right fore wheel, and a spring was snapped as he wrenched her back and saved them from destruction. It was madness to drive at speed after that, and he groaned as he slowed her to reason. He had to keep on despite his flattened casing, and his wrist all but failed as he clung to the wheel, holding the cripple from plunging away on a tangent of death for them both. Almost simultaneously with the accident, the air-startling roar of the huge six-cylinder came vibrantly and clearly on the wind. It was back in tune, with no more missing to cut its power down. "They'll catch us, Thurley," he called to the girl. "We've done for now on speed." She knew precisely what had happened. She knew how utterly mad it would be to race with a flattened front tire. On this rutted road it was not to be attempted for a moment. It would be fairly suicidal. She could think of nothing to say, and Stuyvesant shouted, "What shall we do?" The car was still racing, but slowly now, her speed perhaps sufficient to elude the pursuers for 5 or 6 minutes or more. "We couldn't hide?" cried Thurley, and Stuyvesant glanced at the woods. "There's just one chance," he called above the din, releasing the muffler cut out for the purpose. "Give me your cloak. You take my cap and furs. I'll get out and run so the devils can see me, and you drive on. They'll think it is I still driving, and you are running to hide. Slip off your cloak and be quick." He halted the car as he spoke. "But oh, if anything," Thurley started, when he interrupted quickly. "No time to talk or argue. It's the only chance. Your cloak." He had dropped off his great fur coat and clapped his cap upon her head. She rose, and he stripped her of the old grey garment, helping her swiftly into his furs and urging her into his seat. "If they catch you, Robley," she started as before. "I mustn't let—" "I love you," he said, in the stress and white heat of the moment. "I'd give my life to serve you. Quick, there isn't a moment to lose. Open her up as wide as you dare to drive, and don't stop for anything on earth." He leaped from the car and started for the woods, covered from heels to crown by the long grey cloak that Thurley had trailed in the night. "Goodbye," he called. "Don't wait, don't wait. They're nearly in sight up the road." "Goodbye," she replied, the tears swiftly springing in her softened eyes, and starting the car with her firm young skill, reinforced by the courage demanded by the moment. She was going again at dizzying speed when the huge limousine, belching and roaring with malevolence and bloodlust, shot into view around the bend, and Stuyvesant ran to a bit of brush and crouched as if to hide. One yell of satisfaction, barely audible to Robley, ascended from the pursuing car and informed him he had been seen. Almost at once the detonations of the limousine ceased. The car was halted, for the roadway bent a trifle, and the way to the woods was shorter from here than from where the fugitive had started. Both men leaped from the heated monster and started across the snow and broken ground, rapidly approaching the spot where Stuyvesant was hiding. He leaped to his feet and through dry weeds ran as if staggering with terror. One man fell, but rose again, cursing the root that had thrown him down, and drawing his knife as he once more darted forward. It was Jan, and he quickly overtook his less fiendish comrade, with the quarry now nearly in his grasp. Stuyvesant felt for his pistol and nearly collapsed with the sudden memory he had left it in the car. For a moment he nearly went wild with disappointment, then adopted a desperate plan. Nothing but quickness and the great advantage of surprise could avail to save him now, and this he knew. He seemed to struggle on, when out of the corner of his eye he could see his pursuer's shadow, and in his ear caught the puff and snort of the fellow's breathing. He suddenly halted, turned like a flash, and struck the man with all his might fairly in the pit of his stomach. Down he went like a stricken bullock, doubled with agony, to writhe on the earth in pain and loss of breath. Leaping fairly across his helpless form, Stuyvesant met the German, Max, with an equally unexpected and unparried blow on the point of the chin, and saw him quiver where he fell. It was all accomplished in the briefest span, a matter made comparatively easy by the wholly unlooked-for method of attack. Panting and white with rage and his effort, Robley regarded the first of the two with his eyes that gleamed like steel. The creature was helpless, rolling his eyes in an anguish that did not subside. "You curs!" said Stuyvesant, taking up the knife that Jan had let fall from his hand, and starting at once to make further pursuit impossible. He ran and walked to their waiting car and clambered to the seat. For the first time then, as he made an attempt to grip the wheel with his hand, he realized that his wrist was gone from the blows he had just delivered. In its mending condition, it had been too weak to sustain the force of the shock. It was useless, though not again broken. He had hoped to take the limousine and continue after Thurley. Such a course was out of the question, but to wreck the car was well within his power. He made ready to leap, slipped in the clutch, speeded up as much as he dared, then, pushing the spark and the throttle forward, jumped out at the side and permitted the erstwhile roaring monster to rush unguided down the road. For a moment it clung to the straight bit of road like a thing endowed with life. Then, gathering speed and lunging forward like a maddened animal, it suddenly veered at the highway's curve and plunged with violence incredible down through a glade of the snow and ice, ramming a tree with an impact tremendous to behold. There was a crash of shattered glass, fierce grinding of sounds, the crunching of iron, and turmoil of twisting steel, and its wreckage and ruin were complete. Stuyvesant started down the road where Thurley had gone on foot. There was nothing else to do, no other place to go. He merely wondered how far she might have sped, how far he must walk to come to a village and get a train at last, perhaps with the Princess, and perhaps alone. He glanced back repeatedly until at length he came to a turn of the highway, beyond which was an opening through the woods, affording a view of all the open space where he had met his murderous assailants. Until the place was hidden from his view, he saw no sign that either man had risen from the earth. He was going rapidly, merely intent upon making all possible progress, and inclined to believe that Thurley might attempt to secure assistance beyond and return again to the scene, when he was thoroughly astounded to discover his car standing unattended in the road some distance ahead, a bit of bluish mist between the wheels revealing the fact that the motor was in motion. He hastened his pace, alarmed anew as he saw no sign of Thurley. Then he came to the side of the trembling machine and glanced hurriedly about. Thurley had disappeared. For a moment, possessed with the wildest beliefs that some new calamity met in this direction had accomplished her destruction after all, he ran ahead, came back, called out her name, and searched all the wooded copse with a quickly roving gaze. Not a ruffling nor a track did the snow in that direction afford. On the road's other side the wind had cleared the frozen earth, making footprints out of the question. But he hastened there and beheld in the field, quite a distance away, something furry that lay in the snow. It was Thurley. When she drove away and left the scene where Stuyvesant, running and hiding, was inviting perhaps even death to overtake him, she had almost immediately suffered a sense of selfishness in attempting to escape while abandoning the man she knew she dearly loved. She had merely obeyed instructions hurriedly supplied. Then the limping cart, bumping stiffly over frozen ruts, had presently added an element unforeseen. The seat cushion next to the one she occupied was jolted from its place. In a shallow receptacle where it had been placed lay Stuyvesant's revolver. The car had arrived at the turn of the road, affording a second view of the field where Stuyvesant was running. As Thurley looked, she beheld a man go down in a sudden encounter. She was certain it was Robley, viciously attacked by the creatures at her heels. She had halted the car, snatched up the revolver, and run with all her might toward the place half seen beyond. Then her foot struck a root. She plunged head foremost on the earth. The pistol was discharged, and she lay there motionless and white. End of chapter 42.